I'm your defense attorney, and I'm going to try to defend you when I go into a session where I'm being asked about your performance and why you're a strong candidate for promo.
Welcome to Ren Talks Design. Here I share stories, strategy, and system to help you level up your product design career. Today, my guest is Leslie Yang. Leslie leads product design for Lyft's core platform teams, where she focuses not just on solving complex product and user challenges, but also on growing high-performing design teams. As a seasoned manager, she is passionate about helping ICs advance their careers through clarity, coaching, and structure.
Every designer on my team has a growth plan within 2 months of being on my team, and we have regular career conversations.
Before Lyft, she led enterprise design teams at OpenTable and helped build 0 to 1 products, and teach product discovery at Pivotal Labs for clients ranging from early stage startups to Fortune 500s. This episode is packed with honest insights about promotions, performance, and navigating the messy middle of career growth in design.
I will admit some ICs see pathways document as like a one-time checklist. Like, I've done all these things. I'm like, you've done them once. It doesn't mean you're necessarily good at those things yet.
So grab a cup of something and let's get into it. Hi, Leslie. Thank you so much for coming and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this all week.
Oh, same, same. So, Leslie, I know you have developed a lot of tools for designers and ICs to grow their career, including the career development framework. And before we dive into the actual detail of the framework, I'm curious in understanding what has inspired you to create such content and tools for us.
Yeah. So, for me, it really comes from both like it's personal, but also something that I want to do for my team. So when I was an IC, I really wished I had a manager that was super consistent about supporting my career growth. I remember having these pretty occasional career conversations, but really very little happened out of them. So I learned the hard way, as many of us do, which is we need to advocate for ourselves. But I always felt like I was just cobbling together from different mentors and sources what it meant to be better as a designer and what would it take to work towards a promotion. It all felt like a black box. And then the other thing is that as a manager, one of the hardest parts about being a manager is I'm responsible for the performance of my overall team, not just one person, but just myself. So when someone isn't doing well, it's really on me to help them improve for the sake of their team and also the business. So when I first became a manager, I needed to give some pretty constructive feedback to someone, but I didn't want it to feel personal or subjective. So I turned to our career pathways document, which some people call a ladder. And that was a really helpful tool that we could look at together to identify where they could improve and also be really specific about what change looked like. And now I have this like career growth framework that I started at OpenTable and I brought into Lyft. I've shared with other design leaders at different companies, and some folks are also using it too. It's agnostic of function as well. I've seen product leaders use it, I've seen engineering leaders use it. And yeah. So now every designer on my team has a growth plan within 2 months of being on my team, and we have regular career conversations.
Wow, that's really cool. And it's so fascinating to hear that other functions like engineering product has adopted that framework as well. So that's pretty universal. So one thing I know a lot of ICs struggle to understand is the concept of growth. What does growth actually mean? Especially beyond the notion of getting a promotion. So how do you define career growth?
Yeah, looking back, I think it's really important. I think for me at the time, when I was in IC, I really didn't see promo and growth as like separate. I always saw them as one and the same. So I would say to like you or anyone else who's like, you really want to separate those two mentally for yourself, because a promotion is really just one milestone out of many things that happen in your journey in your career, and not often the biggest sign of growth. Sometimes it's an outcome of all the effort that you've been taking and making towards getting better and better at what you do. um, yeah, and if you want to work towards a promotion, you want to ask yourself, like, do my growth goals actually align to working at the next level? Because that's really what it is, part of the definition of what makes someone eligible for going up for promo.
What does it take for someone to get a promotion?
So I'm speaking, I'm speaking very generally because I can't speak for like one company. You want to just understand that going up for promo, you need to be showing a high degree of initiative as well as autonomy in your level and the level above. So usually if someone is more likely to get promoted or be more eligible for promotion if they're operating at the level above their current one, because you're exceeding the expectations of your role and you're taking on more responsibility beyond your level, and you show consistency to be able to maintain that level of skill that is above your current level. So that's like a very cut and dry kind of thing. But then when you look at the leveling document, which most companies have, you don't have one and maybe you're at a startup, there are levels listed publicly from different companies. You can use that as like an informal measuring stick with your manager if you don't have one. But you really want to look at that other level and then make sure you've got projects as well, multiple projects and multiple instances of you operating consistently at that next level. And that makes you a stronger candidate for promotion. Now, financially, that's also a pretty big thing, which is there's not like unlimited money to like promote everyone who's exceeding expectations. And so really you're not competing against each other, but you're competing against who's got a lot more projects that are either high visibility, super ambiguous, very challenging to work on, and doing an excellent job of performance on those projects. It's also a hard process to go up for because it can be a pretty competitive process across companies.
Yeah, it sounds like it's pretty important to first understand your current level and how you are performing against your current level.
Yeah.
So, how do you advise a designer to start going about doing that?
Yeah, so the first thing you want to say is to your manager, like, I would like to move towards a promotion. I
Mm-hmm.
am not expecting it to happen immediately because that can sometimes surprise the manager. Like, oh, I didn't know you want to do this. Maybe you may or may not have all the right projects or the time in role to like be eligible. But what you can do is just let them know that's something that is a goal for you. And I think it's also helpful for you to say, like in a mature way, I don't know like how far it will take, how far or how long it will take, but I certainly want to work with you to better understand where I am, what my gaps are, and really figure out where I can improve to get closer and closer to that promotion. And just really open to the feedback that you may want to share with me about where I am at. So that conversation is really important to have. Sometimes managers might think that, hey, maybe you're just happy with your current role, and there's some people don't really want to get promoted. They feel good at the level they're at, and that's fine. So it's just helpful to first let them know, and then you want to set up like a plan to like close those gaps. I do think it's really important to look at the pathways document because then you can just like look at the next level and be like, do I have projects that kind of map to those bullet points, right? Do I have multiple ones? Because sometimes I will admit some ICs see pathways document as like a one-time checklist. And like I've done all these things. I'm like, you've done them once. It doesn't mean you're necessarily good at those things yet. And that's okay. We're all works in progress, but you really need to demonstrate excellence in those different bullet points and have multiple examples of that. That's when you become a very strong candidate for promo. The last thing I'll just say, I forget forgetting to mention this, is that there's a business and financial aspect to promo in this in the sense that, you know, there needs to be a business need for someone to be promoted. For example, if there are already a few other staff designers and there's not a need for another staff designer, unfortunately, they may not be possible for you to be promoted if there isn't a need for that level of responsibility for like the kinds of projects that are incoming or the company isn't growing that much. All of those things are factored in as possibilities. And that's an unfortunate truth, but I just think it's important to mention that for transparency because certainly your manager is going to want to try to do and support your career growth, but sometimes it may not be the right time too.
Mm. Wow, there's so many things I want to
There's so
unpack.
many things.
Okay,
For
let's
sure.
start from the beginning. So it sounds like you should first let your manager know that you are interested
Correct.
in moving to the next
Yes.
level way ahead of time so they have time to
Yeah.
prepare. Don't say, give me a promotion today. That's a bad
Hmm.
idea. And then, what are some of the strong behaviors that's indicating a designer that might have been ready to move to the
Yeah,
next
yeah.
level?
There's a bunch there. So one of them is initiative and autonomy. So a clear indicator for seniority in any designer is they're not waiting for someone to tell them what to do next. And you're going to work with your partners to figure out those opportunities, your cross-functional partners, your product, your edge leaders, and you're really being very curious and self-directed to either lead or co-lead with your partners to figure out what do you work on next. And you're okay with things being ambiguous or challenging, and you're good-natured about it, hopefully. You're not waiting for your PM to tell you what to do with like a product brief or a PRD. You've maybe have co-written that yourself with your PM. You're getting data. You're collecting data yourself, whether with data science or it's customer support or talking to a PM. Like you're really trying to understand what's going on and why. And you think about how are you going to go after those opportunities together. So you're really co-leading. It's also helpful if I see that you're being resourceful about overcoming these challenges or finding partners to help, and you do a good job of keeping stakeholders aligned. Sometimes designers focus a lot on craft, but being able to bring people along on this process is also so important for them to both understand and also support your work. Another thing is really on product thinking. So I consider it someone who is highly driven to validate the experiences that I perhaps as a designer have created. And I think about how I want them to be received in the market and how they're being received in the market. So yeah, you understand that you're launching a bet into the market and that enough people are understanding that they are going to want it. And there's something essentially offering that's going to build and grow the business. So you're thinking about it from a business mindset too. And that's really important because it's about the user, but it's also more than just about the user. And there are a few other things, which is like, you understand that you're trying to figure out where the right problems to solve versus trying to generate a lot of solutions. And then I already mentioned being data informed around like decision making and design, but also would say like scope is a big deal. So you're handling high degrees of, at a senior level, you're handling higher and higher degrees of ambiguity because the scope is really big. Maybe you own like a pretty large feature set or service area or a major vertical in a company. And then you handle complexity in the sense that like there are could be a lot of different user problems you have to coordinate and you have to work with other teams to manage all those flows and just make them super consistent as well as with other things that we're perhaps also marketing in our offerings too. So it's a lot of things, which is why I feel like that's why it can feel like a black box for designers, because when leaders have to come in and make a call between different designers, they have to consider all of these different aspects that I just mentioned, where they sit along in the pathways, like how far along they are in that experience, and they try to be pretty fair about who gets that promotion in the end, or the smaller number of people who we're able to grant promos to.
Yeah, that's a lot of things that you have to consider. Like you mentioned,
Yeah.
you need to have the product thinking and you need to show initiatives and autonomy, all these things. I wonder, are those common considerations across all level in your design career, or is there any nuances between, like, for example, mid-level designer to a senior designer versus like a staff
Yeah.
principal
Yeah,
distinguished?
yeah, yeah. I think autonomy grows more and more. Like, for example, someone earlier in their career maybe only manages like one or two workflows in a given like product area. Then, as they kind of gain more and more responsibility, maybe they own like an entire app. And then maybe they own an entire surface, like all the mobile experiences potentially, or just like a large set of mobile experiences. Or they're kind of they have a pretty extended workflow from like web to mobile and back. So it just kind of grows over time. And so their ability to handle that level of responsibility, the number of teams they have to coordinate with, the alignment they need to get with different stakeholders at different levels, all of those things are factored in. But hopefully the pathways documents that companies have define that. And that can be like a good guide for you on where you want to grow. I will say though that sometimes pathways documents are pretty confusing to to read, and so you're like, what does this mean? So I really think it's so important to work with your manager and be let's talk about it. So one thing that I do with my team is we have like a little assessment, which sounds a little formal, but basically I have them fill out a doc that has their current level and then level above, and I have them mark where they see themselves, and then we have a conversation about it. And I'll be like, okay, it means this, and here's an example. And then they're like, oh, okay. They'll either realize they haven't done very much of it, and that's okay. And then we can work on that. Or B, they'll be like, oh, I have done a bunch of these things. I'm like, cool, tell me more about the projects that you've been doing that contribute to this. And then I think over time in that conversation, they actually understand where they stand and where they need to grow. And then out of that, we come up with areas of growth that go into the development plan.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the abstractness of the career pathway document. Like, I personally have seen a few and I have a lot of questions. Like, for
Yeah.
example, one thing that got me was you need to be considered as an expert within the company. What does that even
Mm,
mean? So, as a design manager, I wonder how do you translate from something like expert within the company. What does it translate to?
Yeah, so it means that literally people who have less experience in this area are coming to you for advice or guidance or they want feedback on their designs because they know that you are the one that knows the most in this particular area that has the most context. So expertise can feel a little abstract because you're like, am I an expert in the industry? No, probably not. But within a given company or within a given team, you're like the go-to person, right? And I think that's kind of like the way I would interpret what you just said. But it's also going to be context specific to your company. So it's just good to calibrate with your
Mm-hmm.
manager or your even your skip level to be like, if expertise is something that's really important for you to see from me, like can we set up some goals around me kind of developing that over time?
Yeah, so the reason why I bring that one up is because it's a little confusing to me on how would you evaluate that? Am I supposed to screenshot every single Slack message when someone asks me a
Oh, I
question?
see. No, you don't have to do that. I want to do in that case is to get feedback from other people that have gone to you for advice or guidance and just say, hey, I'm going for promo soon. I'm just collecting feedback. Could you talk about how I've been able to help you on your project when you've come to me for advice or guidance? And this is the bullet point, honestly, I would love for you to speak to in terms of how we've worked together. So the reality is it is an entire process to set up a very strong case for someone to be set up for a promo. I tell people like I'm your defense attorney and I'm going to try to defend you when I go into a session where I'm being asked about your performance and why you're a strong candidate for promo. The evidence they'll have is feedback from your peers, hopefully from more senior folks on the team that can speak with a lot of gravity around what you've been able to contribute meaningfully to the team and the work. So I would just get feedback from those people saying that you're an expert, and that would certainly help.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into how to build a strong case for later.
Yeah.
So, in case you're watching, keep watching. I have a couple follow-up question around the level of autonomy and scope of your project. And I
Mhm.
think that's related to the business need and
Mhm.
timing. So, what if the business is going through some urgency and you just
Yeah.
don't have any larger scope that's in your level that you want to move into available? What would you advise someone to do in that situation?
Yeah, that happens because sometimes you don't have like a lot of like the right projects to set you up for a promo, and I've certainly been there myself. So there are a couple things you can do. The first thing you want to do is obviously let your manager know I would love to work on like more complex projects that are going to be a better fit for promo, while also saying, hey, I'm okay with these projects. I'm too good for them, but I do want to work towards promo. So is there a way for me to like you could loan me out to a team or can you talk to other teams to see if they need anyone to help? So that's something that managers will talk with each other around. I've had certainly had managers reach out to me, and I've reached out to other managers, say, hey, like this person's got, we don't have a ton of like this kind of like bigger work for them. Do you need any help? And then we'll sometimes loan them out if we have enough coverage to be able to get them the experiences they need. That's one take. The other thing is sometimes you just have to wait. Sometimes it just takes a while. And I would just say, like, quite honestly, like going from like being like a junior designer to like a mid-level designer to being a senior to being a lead or a staff, there's it's not like every year you get promoted, right? If you kind of move up. Sometimes like going from like a mid-level to a senior can take like 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It depends just where you're at. It depends on the company as well. Like sometimes larger companies take much longer times to like promote, whereas smaller, maybe startups are pretty fast because they're so fast paced. And then going from like, senior staff, that may take many years as well. And I think sometimes I've been there, I've been impatient too. I'm like, why don't I just get this promo? But sometimes you just need to take the years to get better at what you do. And that's really important to know. If you focus on getting better at what you do, it's like the promos will come over time. But if you only fixate on promo, then you're just constantly, you know, not super happy, I would say. So philosophically try to think about your own work as like, I'm a work in progress. I'm continuing to get better at what I do and get feedback on how to be better at what I do.
Yeah, there's also one other point you mentioned earlier that you can't just be performing at the higher level for just once. Can you
Yeah.
unpack that sentiment a little bit? So, how many times do we have to prove ourselves for you to have confidence that I am good at
Yeah.
that thing?
This question comes up a lot, to be honest with you, because I think sometimes ICs just really want like a number. And the hard thing is I can't
Three.
tell you how many number. Well, it's got to be more than two, is what I would say. But like, I think it's really like, especially if you're going for a higher level promo, there are other people who've done it like two, three, four, five times on like a certain set of projects. Maybe they have bigger projects for whatever reason. It's just there's no like one formula, unfortunately. I wish there was. It'd be easier for everybody. There's no formula. So it's really a mix of all of those skill sets and characteristics, and then looking at how they map to the pathways, and then there's like a bigger decision made. So I would say doing something like if you imagine you worked on ambiguous like a 0 to 1 product or like a very ambiguous project once, my assumption is you've learned a lot, but you haven't necessarily are not like maybe the smoothest or the fastest at that kind of project. So maybe the second time you're getting better, the third time you're like an ace at it. So that's how I think of the progression of someone doing something but getting better at it. By the third time, I would say like, okay, this person's like has done the revs on doing something difficult, can bring people along effectively, and continues to be well trusted. The reality is that sometimes some people have been promoted too early. This is an Eng director telling me this story, and it's led to burnout because they weren't able to uphold that performance over time, and that led to some difficult conversations with that person and a lower rating too. That's also for their own good that we want to make sure you feel ready to do the work because you've done it before, and that the team can trust you to operate at that next level consistently.
That's very interesting. Like, I'm so glad you called that out because most I see are like kind of fixated. I want to get a promotion, and I think
Yeah.
promotions, there's only good will come out of the promotion. So that's a very interesting perspective that if you fail at the higher level, you might have to go through like a performance improvement plan or even being like let go from the position for not being ready
Yeah,
yet.
that's worst case scenario. Yeah. I mean, we hope it doesn't get to that point, but you do have to provide feedback if that person's operating below the level that they're at.
Yeah. In addition to getting a promotion, and you mentioned there's like other things you might want to grow. Like my goal was to learn more about accessibility. How can we better find out what else do we really want to grow? And how can we align that with our passion a little bit more?
Yeah. So is your question about how do you, in addition to growing alongside the pathway, how do you continue to grow in the ways you want to?
I
Hmm.
think for individual contributors, we always have something that we want to learn to get better, like visual design or like delightful animations, things like that. That's kind of their passion. So, how do we, like, I guess there's two questions. One is how do we discover what we're interested in, we're passionate in, become better? And two, and how can we combine our passion with the career pathway a little bit better?
Okay. So I think it's kind of like learning anything, right? You don't know if you'll like it unless you try it, right? So I think it's helpful. It's like you want to own your career growth yourself. Like sometimes people look to their manager to define their career growth or to define when they're ready, uh, or when they're a senior, but really ultimately it's your responsibility to level up and grow too. So if you're interested in accessibility, there's nothing stopping you from reaching out on LinkedIn to accessibility experts outside the company. Are there people really passionate about accessibility, for example, in your company? So I'd set up coffee dates to just understand how do they learn and level up? What kind of projects do they work on? You want to think about and just chat with your manager for sure and say, hey, I want to level up on this. Is it okay if I check in with you once a month about my progress on getting better at accessibility requirements or folding accessibility into how I design? And I think the answer will be obviously yes. I'm happy to talk with you about that. For context, the growth plan that I set up for all of my team members, it's not just against their bullet points in the pathway. They can certainly add other things that they're really curious about. And I just tell them, like, I'm your fitness coach. I'll just keep you consistent. We'll talk once a month. And they can be small changes. That's great. You're doing something, right? It's always about just progress over perfection. And if learning is a goal, and I think learning is a great way to be thinking about how you want to grow, then it's really about having like someone you can be accountable to. So even if your manager's not, then maybe you don't have like an individual development plan or growth plan with your manager. You can just say, hey, like once a month, I want to talk about my career and just let you know I'm trying to work on these things. And then you can just like give me some advice. Is that okay with you? And I'm sure they're going to say yes because they have one-on-ones with you. It's already set in the calendar, and I'm sure they're happy to support you.
How much does these activities help you in terms of getting a promotion? Are they taken into consideration at performance review?
It really depends on what you're trying to get better at. If it's pretty close to product design, like accessibility standards, or you're trying to like figure out how to designing for AI and you're spending time learning about it by testing different products and writing your own prompts or what have you, like those things are pretty close. They're in some ways overlapping with career pathways. So then I think that shows initiative and a willingness to learn. If it's like, I want to get better at, I don't know, something outside of your function, um, you're at a company that's a B2B SaaS company, but you want to get better at animation. Maybe this B2B SaaS product doesn't really need any animation. So that just feels like a thing that you're doing and that's a nice to have. And I'm like, that's great that Rand's doing this, but you were hired to do this thing and to get better and better at it. So it's a nice thing to mention, but it's not something that would be a competitive element in your application for promo, is what I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. So unless you can make a business case on why animation is useful for our SaaS tool, that will
Yeah.
be just like a nice to have personal passion. So now we're going back to this whole process of building a strong case. And
Hmm.
I like when you talk about the case, I am imagining the self-review section in your annual or every 6 months your performance review process. So, how
Yeah.
do you recommend a designer build the best case for themselves in terms of getting a promotion?
Yeah, every company's review cycle is different in terms of format, but typically you cover your top projects that have the most impact. You have data points that back the impact. Impact can vary, sometimes because of your function, sometimes because of like just circumstance. Like you don't always have like the impact numbers and metrics you were able to move. Sometimes the impact was like a process change or maybe you overcame some like difficult like stakeholder challenge and that led to like a breakthrough for the team to be unblocked to move a project forward, but it doesn't have any material numbers to it. So you want to be able to describe beyond metrics and numbers, if you don't have those, some of the process improvements or other moments of impact that you're able to make in terms of changes, whether that's team or process to a given like project. So you cover top projects, you hopefully have strong numbers or strong evidence of impact. And sometimes they'll ask different questions like, what did you learn? Or how are you aligned to like the values of the company? And sometimes you'll have some examples of that too. But it certainly depends on what kinds of questions are being asked in your company's performance review. So you kind of want to think about that. But you also want to know what your impact was. And sometimes different teams will put together a bunch of metrics right before the cycle for everyone to use so they can have that as evidence for their review.
A lot of times we know like we want to list our projects and then the
Mhm.
direct business impact. So those are like the big things. And it's interesting you mentioned that you can talk about like team dynamic and how you impacted them and how you contributed or demonstrated the company value. For one of the common advice that I've heard people suggesting is to keep a running one-on-one doc with your manager and then like continuously you report to them on your impact and those lists will end up serving as a document of your impact. In addition to that, is there any other recommendations that you have to best represent yourself?
Yes. The only other thing I'd recommend is you want to be collecting feedback from high level partners, but just be clear that you've actually worked with these people pretty closely. The more senior you are, the more it's helpful to get feedback from like an engineering manager, or for me, it's like I interact more with engineering directors or product directors. Getting their feedback is going to be important for them to talk about how your impact has added more value to the business as well as to the team itself. They speak from a higher degree of authority too. So, but obviously, don't if you don't work with an engineering manager and you're trying to get feedback, it just that's a little hollow. So make sure you actually have those working relationships. Being able to collect feedback regularly, especially after a project. I know everyone's so tired after they launch their project, but getting that feedback right away means that when you work on your review, you've got a ton of evidence that backs how much of an impact you've been making. Then you can take all those quotes and put it in your promo packet, and then it's already connected to the career pathways as well as showing you operating at the next level.
So, what does that like asking for feedback look like to you?
Yeah.
For example, you've completed this big product is launched and you have amazing impact, do you just go to your engineering director partner and ask, how did I do? How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, you want to be strategic about it. So,
Right.
like, you find a good moment to have a chat with them and you just let them know, hey, like, over time, I'm going to be working towards a promo. So, you want to pull the actual bullet point that you want them to speak to. Maybe it's like strategic alignment or being able to unblock teams on certain parts of like an experience. And so, you basically, honestly, you're writing it for them. So, you have the bullet point you want them to reference or multiple bullet points from the pathways that you want them to reference, and you have bullet points that they can use that you've actually described your own impact to them, and they will take it, adjust it, and then give it back to you. So you have to write it for yourself. And they'll probably add their own bullet points as well. Myself and other people who operate with a number of different teams will get a lot of requests for feedback. Sitting down to write all of these things is quite time consuming. So the more you can do for them, the faster and more likely they'll be able to give you feedback in a timely manner.
I like the timing that you mentioned is right after a project
Yeah.
completion, not waiting for the cycle to come up.
Yeah. Because then it's fresh on their mind. They might even have better things to say.
Does it matter if they send the feedback back to you, or do you like recommend them to direct that feedback to your manager?
At Lyft, you have something called anytime feedback. You can just write it into that tool, which is Workday, and then it just gets submitted and automatically logged. As you switch managers, all that feedback follows along with you, and you can just take that, cut and paste it, and bring it into your promo packet and talk about it. If you don't have that at your company, then you can say, hey, like I'm trying to work on getting better at what I do. I'm also eventually going to go for promo. I just Slack them. I'm just like, hey, this is the thing, and maybe I have a link to a doc that has all that information that they can cut and paste on how
Okay.
they want to write what they want to write. And then figure out with your company and with your manager what is the right way to receive and store that feedback. So whether that's through Workday or whatever HR tool you use, or you just want to keep a running list, a Google Doc of like all the feedback you've gotten, that's okay too. It helps for promo if it's actually logged somewhere objective, because no, if it's just a Google Doc, did you write this or did someone else write this? So figure out with their manager where to best store the feedback so it stays with you and you can use it later for promo
Yeah.
or anything else you want to do with it.
Yeah, that's a fantastic suggestion. And I wanted to actually talk about how you make promotion decisions. So we know
Yeah,
that a lot of designers know you have to talk to your manager and then you have your conversation. And then
yeah.
what we don't know is your manager will then go to this black box called a
Hmm.
calibration conversation with other managers, and some
Yeah,
mysterious things happened in that meeting and they come home
yeah,
with a yes
yeah.
or no.
Yeah, so there's calibration based on rating. So like everyone has a rating, and but the promo discussion is a separate conversation just for context. So they're coming together to review everyone's like self-reflection as well as the feedback, and then they note the rating. Like the manager proposes a rating for a person, and then everyone's reading all everyone's documentation. Now this becomes more difficult the larger the design team for sure. So sometimes they have these smaller groups, but they're going in there looking at each other's work and then asking questions. Now, sometimes it can become a little contentious if, especially if the bigger the team, the less you know about the other team's work. Like, well, you say this person's strategic, but they worked with like these eng people, these eng managers on this one thing. Is that really that impactful? But then that's why you need the managers like, well, actually, this led to like a pretty big solve for the sev that we're dealing with, right? So then because you're there to explain that hopefully allows all the managers to be treating and managing the rating more equally, right? Because like the definitions could be different per team, but this is meant to drive fairness in terms of rating. Like there might be someone that's overly positive about their team, and maybe some other manager is like, well, I worked with this person and their follow through wasn't actually that strong, and here's why. The goal is to actually get to more fair ratings, not to create this very highly political environment. Ultimately, you just want to be fair. We also will use the pathways to ensure we're fair as well in terms of calibrations. Our HR person has a deck that we go over every time we calibrate to make sure that we are fair and not biased in terms of how we work together. So there's certainly a desire within both leaders, between leaders, to just be super fair about how they talk about how they evaluate folks. Now the promo stuff is a little different. There are decision makers above me that make the call for if I'm putting someone up for a promo. So my goal is to provide a packet of information that has your self-reflection, really great feedback from your partners over an X number of months or years. Sometimes there's a deck around the work just for context for certain leaders because they may be so high level they don't have as much visibility into what you do. So they just need some context. Oh, this is the design that they did. And sometimes that's also an evaluation for craft as well. That's a gut check too. So all of these things are considered, and then there's a smaller committee that makes the decision. And usually it's a mix of different managers, either at my level or directors above, that are really trying to understand like how qualified is this person against the pathway versus another person. And so they have those conversations. And sometimes outside of that, there's an even longer conversation with another set of higher level design leaders too, if that's the case. The head of design wants to review all the promos too. So there's some level of that. So you just want to be very thorough in your documentation as well as make sure your manager has all the talking points to cover your experience. It is a lot on the manager, but it's also a lot on the IC to be able to document all this information thoroughly. So what I've done in the past is have them identify their projects, but also identify how different projects they've done have mapped to the pathway. That way it's very comprehensive evidence of whether my manager is a good advocate for me or not. I have all the context that they can use that someone else can review and make a good decision on my promo. Hopefully
Yeah.
that's helpful.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Nobody has ever talked about this, at least to me. So that's extremely helpful. You are putting on a curve for everyone's ratings and you normalize everybody's ratings. How much of that is actually competitive? Do you have to fight for getting on the top?
I think it depends on the company. It depends, yeah. In the middle, most people land there. And then there are people that are exceeding or strongly exceeding expectations in some way, right? So as a manager, you would expect to have more, be able to speak to more evidence to justify why they're above the normal curve of ratings. We do hold like the curve also includes those who are like exceeding or strongly exceeding expectations, right? But those are considered lower numbers. Like not everyone on the team is exceeding expectations. Maybe they are, I don't know. But like typically there's a bit of a spread in terms of like performers that are like doing well at their level, and then those who are like could be wildly exceeding for whatever reason. So yeah, we do talk about that, but you just want to be able to justify it as a manager and be able to back it up.
Is it possible for someone to exceed their expectation or wildly exceed their expectations and still not get a promotion? And if so, what
Yes.
might be the reasons for that?
The reasons might be because of the business like not having the funds to be able to support that. Like maybe there's not enough business need to have another staff designer on the team because maybe the scope of the work also is like not there aren't enough projects for three staff designers. So that's a really hard reality because you can feel like I've done everything that you've asked me to do and I'm still not getting promoted. At those moments, you can ask yourself, does it make sense for me to ask to switch teams? Or to honest, the hardest thing is looking for another opportunity that feels like a better fit for where you want to go in your career too. But hopefully as a manager, you don't let it get to that point. But it happens too. When suddenly you're like, as if I'm trying to support you, but I can't give you the opportunities you need, then it becomes, how can I help you in some other way?
That's just very unfortunate situation.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There could be other reasons that are outside of the realm of this, like trying to think of any other reason. But yeah, mainly it's business need, but I mean, it could just be that there could be other people that in a limited budget not able to support it budget wise. Yeah, that's also out of your control as well.
Yeah. So, like, all of these sounds like having a great, strong, caring manager is really important. Like, they will actually advocate for you on your behalf. What do you do when you do not have such a manager? Like, maybe your manager is a little bit, I don't know, inexperienced or just disengaged. How do you manage up in that situation?
Yeah, yeah, and I've certainly been there. Just to be fully transparent, I've had someone say to me when I was an IC, "Well, I don't know your work that well, so I can't promote you." And I'm like, "You could have just asked me about my work, or did my last manager leave any notes for you?" So that kind of thing is infuriating to me. That's why I'm like, I don't want to be that person at all. I feel you on that. And so a lot of it's just remembering that you drive your career, right? It's ultimately still your responsibility. So If you're collecting feedback, if you're collecting impact, you want to just keep like a thorough document that you can always refer to. If you have an experienced manager, then you have to be kind of giving them guidance on what you need, like let them know you want to get promoted, and then want to talk to other more experienced managers and ask them for advice on like, how would you give me advice on how to navigate towards promo. So talk to people that know more or know better, or you could also encourage them to talk to like other managers as well. It's difficult in those moments when they're less experienced, but promo packets sometimes can be very short. At one company, I just wrote a paragraph and that person got promoted later. And there were another company, we had to write this 10-page documentation and it's extensive. And it's like, here, I wrote this tome. Um, and you just want to like make sure you write it yourself and that you have plenty of evidence that backs it up and then you show that document to other managers and get their feedback. I've certainly looked at different candidates who don't report to me and I've looked at their promo candidate documents and I've given them some feedback on how to talk about their success and that sort of thing. So get advice from others outside of your direct manager is probably the best way to go.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We all know you probably are having one on ones regularly with your manager.
Yeah.
And if you're not, you
Yeah.
should. So, how do you like, is there any structures or type of things you want to recommend ICs do in these one on one meetings?
You definitely want to use like it's kind of what I've said before, which is you really want to say one, you want to say you want to get promoted. Two, you want to say you want to get to a point where you're looking at the pathways document and say, hey, like I would love to go for promo. I don't know where I stand. I'm probably a little far away from it. Hopefully, it's like you're maybe 6 months to a year out. That gives you a lot of time to figure out and look at your work objectively to see if it's actually on track towards promo and how far away you are from it. Sometimes managers are afraid to tell you that you're like you might be 2 years away. But maybe that level of honesty is really important for you to be like, okay, then I have time to work towards this. Let me just work, let me just like let's come up with a plan together. And so I think it's really good to just start from that point during the one-on-ones. And it's like, hey, can we actually use the pathways document to like talk about where I'm at? Because I think sometimes if you ask a manager how far am I away from promo, it's a very like it's a difficult uh answer to give because it's like as I mentioned before, it's pretty multifaceted, right? If you can use the pathways document, it's a very objective way of being like, well, let's talk through like what's at the next level, like look at my current level and let's talk about where I'm at, right? Hey, like I feel like I'm pretty good at this. What do you think? And then they're like, well, I haven't really seen X, Y, and Z from you. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, can you give me an example of like what would be better? And then you're just collecting data and you're literally calibrating together on where you stand. I think that's really important. Then you're like, hey, is it cool if we come up with like a few goals that I can work on that will close the gap. And then I would just love to like check in with you pretty regularly, like once a month or quarterly on this. I think most managers have quarterly conversations. Some have monthly. I have monthly conversations with my team, but they're like smaller incremental goals they're working towards. And I'm just giving them advice and coaching them how to like do these hard things on a regular basis. And I actually really love my manager right now. She's great. But yeah, she has regular conversations and we have like deep, thoughtful, like agreements on like what we want to do and what I want to work on. But I think when you ask for permission to like look at talk about your career objectively and use the career pathways document as a very objective way, then it's and actually I think that actually helps you feel more clear about what you want, where you want to go and where you stand.
Yeah.
But also be open to the fact that maybe you're not there yet and that's okay. And what would it take is the question you want to pose to them.
Yeah, definitely. So use your career pathway as like an objective way to evaluate you honestly with your manager and then having regular check-ins to look
Yeah.
at the pathway again to make sure you're on track. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for sharing all of these like unspoken insights for how promotions decisions are made and how do you get a promotion as a designer. What is like looking back on your very successful career? What was your biggest career mistake and what did you learn from it? And what can listeners take away from that?
What's my biggest mistake? I think it was not asking for wasn't advocating for myself as much as I should have. And not in a very demanding kind of way, but I think I should have said I wanted to work towards promo and like asked very clearly like what would it take to get there. I think I just thought my manager just made a decision and then it happened. Which now I'm on the other side, that's not the case. But I think if I just asked for like I would love to move towards promo or I would love a promotion, what would it take to get there? I think just advocating for myself maybe would have sped up my career in some ways too.
I think that's really nice that you shared that. I know a lot of people, including me, had period of time where they believe if I do enough good work, my quality work will speak for itself. But we all know
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the case.
Fortunately not, but I really want to just folks to remember that like, your career is like a lifetime, right? So both be patient with yourself, but continue to like think about where you can get better and get feedback from like the leaders around you. And I'm sure you'll move along faster than you think than you will. Yeah.
If any of the viewers or listeners want to keep in touch with you or learn more from you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can look at my writing on leslieyang.substack.com. I try to write regularly. It's where I put in a lot of my hard lessons learned on how to get better and become a better leader.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Leslie. Thank you for being here. If this sparks something for you, share it with someone that you care about. And if you want more like this, make sure you follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Talk soon.